Hello everybody, welcome to the Ditton Works YouTube channel. Predominantly on this channel I talk about speakers, and predominantly I talk about Celestion speakers, and we are going to talk a little bit about those today. The objective today is I wanted to see how the actual system, the equipment, could potentially affect the tonal characteristics, the sonic performance of the speakers. So today I'm going to use one setup with these Celestion SL600si. The SL600 was the famous Aerolam cabinet speaker, and there's a couple of different versions using the Aerolam cabinet. The original SL600, that's about 1984. Then you've got the SL700, which uses the aluminium tweeter and a braced cabinet. The SL600se, which is the revised version with different drive units and a better crossover. And you've got these, which are the 600si. And the differences between the 600 and the 600si is a crossover revision. These are bi-wireable, the original ones aren't. And there's some component changes in the crossover, which are supposedly helping to reduce any mid-range congestion. The first system I'm going to use to try these speakers is from Quad. And amplification-wise, it's Quad's 606. I think that camera's going to show that the wrong way around. The preamplifier is a 66 with a huge remote control and a 67 compact disc player. So I'm going to play a piece of music using the Quad setup through these. I'll try and show it on here. You won't get the gist of it on here, but once I've listened to it, I'll try and explain how I think it sounds. Then we'll play the same CD on my setup. My setup is a bit of a mix and match of various different things. I will be using a Teac CD transport, a benchmark DAC1, a Quad Artera preamp, so I have got some Quad in my setup, and a Meridian 557. The other differences between wiring is my cables for my setup are bi-wired, so I will pull out the link bars and it will be bi-wired on my setup, which isn't the most fair way of doing it, but I really can't be bothered to keep swapping cables around at the amplifier end. I've neatened them all up and I'm quite happy with them. So we'll have a quick close look at the speakers, we'll have a quick close look up at the setup, and then we'll discuss if there is any sonic characteristics or playback differences between the two different pieces of equipment using the same speakers. So it's a little bit messy in one's room when you have two complete setups running. Celestion SL600s on their correct stands, which are about 43 centimeters high. The famous Cobex driver, which most of them, actually all of them, have the same cone but slightly different surrounds on various different models. This absolutely sonically dead Aerolam cabinet with the famous copper tweeter, and these are in fantastic condition, as are mine. And these do differ slightly from the original ones, other than the things I mentioned. These are a different colour. The finish seems to be nicer and lasts a bit longer. If I move back, we've got the Quad CD player, the Quad preamp, the Quad CD player, and the Quad power amp, and this quite incredible remote control. One of Quad's little features is not so much tone controls, but they have a tilt mechanism, which I won't bother trying to explain now, but the basics of it is that tilt mechanism alters the kind of tonal balances. So you can tilt it more to a brighter sound or tilt it more to a warmer sound, increasing, say, the bass in the second example or the HF in the first example. For today's video, I'm going to run the tilt completely flat. I will also be running my system completely flat. That's the fairest way I can do it. And in all honesty, I very rarely play about with tone controls on any of my setups anyway. move the camera, switch systems. Okay, that was really interesting. So you probably won't detect it on the recordings. Basically, the quality of the microphone on a phone is just not going to be good enough for this. But what I was detecting here in the room is with the quad setup, good amount of drive, good amount of control. The bass was very, very good, very solid. But when Ditton was playing on the frets of his guitar, some of the sort of string strikes as you're moving up through weren't apparent. So some of that high detail features were not really that obvious running the quad setup. As on my setup, I could definitely hear those. Now, that doesn't make the quad setup worse than mine, because before I turned the camera back on, I tried the same track and adjusted the tilt, and it was present. I would say if somebody was trying to run this system completely flat, you would probably benefit from running speakers that were a little bit more revealing or potentially brighter than SL600s, which are known for being quite rolled off in the HF. Other differences, listening to my setup, you felt like you were stepping into the recording a little bit more. There was a little bit more instrument separation, especially when the strings came in. But again, off camera, when I adjusted the tilt, you were able to recreate that. So there's never, in my opinion, there's never a better or a worse unless you go ridiculous. So if you had a pair of B&W Nautiluses and a pair of £5 hi-fi speakers, yes, there's definitely a better and a worse. But when you're dealing with equipment that's all similar sort of age, similar sort of spec, similar sort of value, you're not really getting better or worse, you're just getting different. And if those differences suit your ears, then that's perfect. That is another way of putting system matching. So in my opinion, the SL600s were not really a good match for the quad setup. Maybe the SL6S with the aluminium tweeter, or a completely different brand of speakers altogether. If I had enough time, I would potentially try my AVI Bigatrons or a pair of Proax or my Spendors, just to see if there was any other further differences. But ultimately, this quad setup sounds great, absolutely fantastic. Very warm, very well driven, very controlled sound. The same speakers on mine, still very well driven and very well controlled, but there's just a little bit more air around the instruments and a little bit wider sound stage, that both running them flat is quite noticeable, but you can actually adjust that and tune that with the tilt control, which is a nice little feature. So this is going to be very short, sharp and sweet. I don't have an awful lot of time today to really delve into the differences, but basically I didn't use the by-wire cable off of mine because it wouldn't stretch out far enough, as the SLs, or the by-wire terminals, are in a row, and I've cut them so they're on top and bottom like on my Spendors. So actually I ended up using the same wire, speaker wire, for my setup as I did for the quad. The quad's got reasonable interconnects, and I have used Russ Andrews' power cable going up to the splitter, but I didn't have enough decent mains leads to put on the quad. If I had, that would have been really the fairest comparison, but unfortunately all of those wires are tied up in my own system and I can't pull all of that apart just for this video, unfortunately. But yeah, to summarise, quad, fantastic sounding. As a system match for the SL600s, my friend Neil, who commented on one of my other posts, was quite right. They weren't a great match, but good enough. As where if it'd been a bit more selective with speaker choices, I think we could have found something that was absolutely excellent for the quad setup. As where I'm quite used to SL600s, I have a pair of them, my own pair, and I have used them on my setup, and I'm more than happy with those. Anyway, guys, that's the Ditton Works review for today. So if you take any note from this, system matching is important. It's well worth considering what the tonal characteristics of the equipment are in comparison to the tonal characteristics of the speakers. And in this case, warm sounding equipment with warm sounding speakers wasn't a good match, in my opinion. Okay guys, take care, speak to you soon.